I admit that profane men lay hold of the subject of predestination to carp, cavil, snarl, or scoff. But if their petulance frightens us, it will be necessary to conceal all the principal articles of faith, because they and their fellows leave scarcely one of them unassailed with blasphemy. A rebellious spirit will display itself no less insolently when it hears that there are three persons in the divine essence than when it hears that God, when he created man, foresaw everything that was to happen to him. Nor will they abstain from their jeers when told that little more than 5,000 years have elapsed since the creation of the world. For they will ask, why did the power of God slumber so long in idleness? In short, nothing can be stated that they will not assail with derision. To quell their blasphemies, must we say nothing concerning the divinity of the Son and Spirit? Must the creation of the world be passed over in silence? No. The truth of God is too powerful, both here and everywhere, to dread the slanders of the ungodly, as Augustine powerfully maintains in a treatise. For we see that the false apostles were unable, by defaming and accusing the true doctrine of Paul, unable to make him ashamed of it. There's nothing in the allegation that the whole subject is fraught with danger to pious minds, as tending to destroy exhortation, shake faith, disturb and dispirit the heart. Augustine disguises not that on these grounds he was often charged with preaching the doctrine of predestination too freely. But as it was easy for him to do, he abundantly refutes the charge. Well, as a great variety of absurd objections are here stated, we have thought it best to dispose of each of them in its proper place. Only I wish it to be received as a general rule that the secret things of God are not to be scrutinized, and that those which he has revealed are not to be overlooked, lest we may on the one hand be chargeable with curiosity, on the other with ingratitude. For Augustine has shrewdly observed that we can safely follow Scripture, which walks softly as with a mother's step, in accommodation to our weakness. Those, however, who are so cautious and timid that they would bury all mention of predestination in order that it may not trouble weak minds, with what color, pray, will they cloak their arrogance when they indirectly charge God of due consideration, in not having foreseen a danger for which they imagine that they prudently provide? Whoever therefore throws evil speaking or verbal abuse on the doctrine of predestination openly brings a charge against God as having inconsiderately allowed something to escape from him that is injurious to the church. The predestination by which God adopts some to the hope of life and adjudges others to eternal death, no man who would be thought pious ventures simply to deny. But it is greatly cavilled at, especially by those who make prescience its cause. We indeed ascribe both foreknowledge and predestination to God, but we say that it is absurd to make the latter subordinate to the former. When we attribute foreknowledge to God, we mean that all things always were and ever continue under his eye, that to his knowledge there is no past or future, but all things are present, and indeed so present that it is not merely the idea of them that is before him, as those objects are which we retain in our memory, but that he truly sees and contemplates them as actually under his immediate inspection. This foreknowledge extends to the whole circuit of the world and to all creatures. By predestination we mean the eternal decree of God, by which he determined with himself whatever he wished to happen with regard to every man. All are not created on equal terms, but some are preordained to eternal life, others to eternal damnation. Accordingly, as each has been created for one or other of these ends, we say that he has been predestinated to life or to death. This God has testified, not only in the case of single individuals, he's also given a specimen of it in the whole posterity of Abraham, to make it plain that the future condition of each nation was entirely at his disposal. Quote from Deuteronomy, "When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance." Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9. The separation is before the eyes of all. In the person of Abraham, as in a withered stock, one people is specially chosen, while the others are rejected. But the cause does not appear, except that Moses, to deprive posterity of any handle for glorying, tells them that their superiority was owing entirely to the free love of God. The cause that he assigns for their deliverance is, and I quote, he quotes, "Because he loved thy fathers, therefore he chose their seed after them." Deuteronomy 4:37. Or more explicitly in another chapter, 7, verses 7 and 8. "The Lord did not set his love upon you or choose you because you were more in number than any people, for you were the fewest of all people, but because the Lord loved you." He repeatedly makes the same intimation, again in Deuteronomy 10. "Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens is the Lord's thy God. The earth also, and all that therein is. Only the Lord had a delight in thy fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them." Deuteronomy 10:14 and 15. Again in another passage, holiness is enjoined upon them, because they've been chosen to a peculiar people, while in another, love is declared to be the cause of their protection. Deuteronomy 23:5. This, too, believers with one voice proclaim, "He shall choose our inheritance for us, the excellency of Jacob, whom he loved." Psalm 47:4. The endowments with which God had adorned them, they all ascribed to gratuitous love, not only because they knew that they had not obtained them by any merit, but that not even was the holy patriarch endued with a virtue that could procure such distinguished honor for himself and his posterity. And the more completely to crush all pride, he upbraids them with having merited nothing of the kind, seeing that they were a rebellious and stiff-necked people. Deuteronomy 9:6. Often also do the prophets remind the Jews of this election by way of disparagement and opprobrium, because they had shamefully revolted from it. Be this as it may, let those who would ascribe the election of God to human worth or merit come forward. When they see that one nation is preferred to all others, when they hear that it was no feeling of respect that induced God to show more favor to a small and ignoble body, nay, even to the wicked and rebellious, will they plead against God for having chosen to give such a manifestation of mercy? But neither will their obstreperous words hinder his work, nor will their invectives, like stones thrown against heaven, strike or hurt his righteousness. Nay, rather they'll fall right back on their own heads. To this principle, of a free covenant, moreover, the Israelites are recalled whenever thanks are to be returned to God, or their hopes of the future to be animated. The Lord, He is God, says the psalmist. It is He that has made us, and not we ourselves. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. Psalm 100, verse 3, and 95, verse 7. The negation that is added, not we ourselves, is not superfluous, to teach us that God is not only the author of all the good qualities in which men excel, but that they originate in Himself, there being nothing in them worthy of so much honor. In the following words also they are enjoined to rest satisfied with the mere good pleasure of God. O ye seed of Abraham, His servant, ye children of Jacob, His chosen. Psalm 105, verse 6. And after an enumeration of the continual mercies of God as fruits of election, the conclusion is that He acted thus kindly because He remembered His covenant. With this doctrine accords the song of the whole church. Quote, they got not the land in possession by their own sword, neither did their own arm save them, but thy right hand and thine arm and the light of thy countenance, because thou hadst favor unto them. Psalm 44:3. It is to be observed that when the land is mentioned, it is a visible symbol of the secret election in which adoption is comprehended. To like gratitude, David elsewhere exhorts the people, quote, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom He hath chosen for His own inheritance. Samuel thus animates their hopes in 1 Samuel 12:22. The Lord will not forsake His people for His great name's sake, because it hath pleased the Lord to make you His people. And when David's faith is assailed, how does he arm himself for the battle? Psalm 65:4. Blessed is the man whom thou choosest and causest to approach unto thee, that he may dwell in thy courts. But as the hidden election of God was confirmed both by a first and second election and by other intermediate mercies, Isaiah thus applies the term, quote, the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel. Isaiah 14:1. Referring to a future period, the gathering together of the dispersion who seem to have been abandoned. He says that it will be a sign of a firm and stable election, notwithstanding the apparent abandonment. When it is elsewhere said, I have chosen thee and not cast thee away, Isaiah 41:9, the continual course of His great liberality is ascribed to paternal kindness. This is stated more explicitly in Zechariah 2:12 by the angel. The Lord shall choose Jerusalem again, as if the severity of His chastisements had amounted to reprobation, or the captivity had been an interruption of election, which, however, remains inviolable, though the signs of it do not always appear. We must add a second step of a more limited nature, or one in which the grace of God was displayed in a more special form. When of the same family of Abraham God rejected some, and by keeping others within His church showed that He retained them among His sons. At first Ishmael had obtained the same rank with his brother Isaac, because the spiritual covenant was equally sealed in him by the symbol of circumcision. He is first cut off, and then Esau, and at last an innumerable multitude, almost the whole of Israel. In Isaac was the seed called. The same calling held good in the case of Jacob. God gave a similar example in the rejection of Saul. This is also celebrated in the psalm. Moreover, he refused the tabernacle of Joseph, chose not the tribe of Ephraim, but chose the tribe of Judah. That's Psalm 78, verses 67 and 8. This, the sacred history sometimes repeats, that the secret grace of God may be more admirably displayed in that change. I admit that it was by their own fault Ishmael, Esau, and others fell from their adoption, for the condition annexed was that they should faithfully keep the covenant of God, whereas they violated it. The singular kindness of God consisted in this, that he had been pleased to prefer them to other nations, as it is said in the psalm, he hath not dealt so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them, Psalm 147:20. But I had good reason for saying that two steps are here to be observed. For in the election of the whole nation, God has already shown that in the exercise of his mere liberality, he was under no law, but was free, so that he was by no means to be restricted to an equal division of grace, its very inequality proving it to be gratuitous. Accordingly, Malachi enlarges on the ingratitude of Israel in that, being not only selected from the whole human race, but set peculiarly apart from a sacred household, they perfidiously and impiously spurn God, their beneficent parent. Was not Esau Jacob's brother, saith the Lord? Yet I loved Jacob, and I hated Esau. Malachi 1, 2, and 3. For God takes it for granted that, as both were the sons of a holy father and successors of the covenant, in short, branches from a sacred root, the sons of Jacob were under no ordinary obligation for having been admitted to that dignity. But when by the rejection of Esau, the firstborn, their progenitor, though inferior in birth, was made heir, he charges them with double ingratitude in not being restrained by a double tie.